Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is day two and 37 conversations, and wanted to talk about some things today. First and foremost, I've been getting a lot of messages. I didn't expect that. I'm getting a lot of messages as it relates to the 37 conversations series and everything like that. I appreciate it. Appreciate the reshares and all that. I'm not having these conversations to try to you know change the game or change the world or anything like that. It's just merely a matter of ensuring that we are able to talk about race, able to talk about the issues that are impacting people right now throughout our country. And some of my friends have been giving me a hard time hating on the quarantine beard, but I told myself I wasn't going to shave until I went back to work. So that's what that's about. About the messages and everything, other messages though, also, if you have topics or ideas, I already have a bunch that I have queued up and I've been, taking note of. But if you have ideas, let me know. I'll be happy to, take those in consideration, and then also, even have conversations about those as well. I referenced this yesterday, and I think it'd be lost on me if I don't, acknowledge the fact that today is the anniversary of D-Day. The Allied invasion in Normandy, and giving a shout out to all of our service members, men and women that are out there, serving our country. My father's a 30-year U.S. Air Force veteran, and he continues to serve the country today as a civil servant. So, shout out to people like my dad. Shout out to our service members. Because I truly hold high. Every time I write my dad on Veterans Day, this is the greatest military that this planet has ever seen, hands down. So very, very proud of them. Very proud of our vets and our active duty military and such, and reservists as well, obviously. So, people have been, writing messages and stuff and mentioning that, I didn't notice some of the comments that were made in the chat. I'm not really paying attention to that, to be honest. If there's something that you need to send me, direct message me or shoot me a text message or something. But, feel free to leave messages in the chat or whatever the case may be. But I'm not looking at those. So today I want to talk about the movement. Day two, 37 conversations. I want to talk about the movement. I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. There's a lot that's going around, and a lot of misunderstandings and all lives matter and all this other stuff. I think that I'll probably say this a few times while we're talking today, but if you are a member of the movement and you think that you believe in Black Lives Matter, or you're an ally, whatever the case may be, and you see people, saying all lives matter and all that kind of stuff, don't cancel them. Don't cancel them. Educate them. You know what I'm saying? They need to understand and realize that this movement didn't just start today. The Black Lives Matter movement started in 1619 when we were first brought here as slaves. You know what I mean? After the Civil War and all that, and it morphed into this, the civil rights movement, in the 60s and even into the 70s for that matter, where people were just fighting for the fact and for the opportunity to just be treated civilly, to be just treated as human beings. I mean, people of color in this country were dealing with a lot, segregation, lynchings, miscarriages of justice in the legal system and law enforcement and such. So as I collect my thoughts, and I actually had to collect some of my thoughts earlier because I wanted to ensure that, this conversation today was substantive, really wanted to, put some things, out there for everyone to think about and to talk about, with their friends or families or whatever. And then also it comes on the heels of a conversation that I had last night. That's what this whole series is about. Like, conversations I've had with friends in this moment as well, relating, and family members and colleagues relating to this moment that we're in. I had a good friend, Steve. Shout out to my boy, Steve Smith. He came over last night. We had, some conversations, and we were talking about where we are right now. Steve's a white guy, and, just sharing ideas and sharing thoughts and such. So first and foremost, people need to realize that this movement didn't just begin right now. I mean, there was a civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, the voting rights movement. If you're not familiar with the Freedom Riders, empower yourself with knowledge. Go and read up on that. Google it, Wikipedia it, whatever you got to do. And we've been fighting for opportunities in trying to deconstruct stereotypes and trying to amplify our voices, because there have been many occurrences that have happened throughout history that have really highlighted the fact that people of color's lives don't matter. You know what I mean? And there's a lot that we can learn and empower ourselves with that knowledge. But more importantly, like I said, if you have someone else that is talking, well, Black Lives Matter doesn't make sense, I don't get it, it's a terrorist organization, whatever, all this crazy stuff, right? I would encourage you to educate them. Don't cancel them, don't write them off. Like, I would educate them, you know what I mean? So let's talk about the All Lives Matter, situation, you know what I mean, or that movement or whatever. I honestly believe that individuals who embody the All Lives Matter ideal or whatever, they're not wrong. You know what I mean? Like, all lives do matter. You know what I'm saying? I think that they are missing the point, though. I think that organizers, activists, and I would dare to say most people in the Black community don't and are not saying that white lives don't matter, that other people's lives don't matter, that Black lives are more important than their lives. No, that's not the theme or the message whatsoever. The point of it more so is the fact that many of us believe it's dangerous to be Black. Many of us believe that through history and even recent times that our lives aren't valued in the same manner as our white counterparts. So I think that's something that's important to take into heart and to understand. And honestly, it's a matter of privilege. I mean, this movement isn't about you, and I'm speaking to the All Lives Matter, people. This movement isn't about you, but it's one that you should care about. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of hypocrisy as it relates to the opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's a conversation for another day. But I don't understand. I just can't fathom or even comprehend how someone can be, say, for instance, pro-life, right, in the abortion debate or whatever the case may be, but not stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, or someone that just speaks on All Lives Matter in general, but doesn't stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Me personally, I'm fine with people. I'm fine with people saying All Lives Matter, honestly. I mean, I'm fine with that if they also believe that Black Lives Matter and they also support the Black Lives Matter movement. Because it's a privilege. It's a privilege to learn about racism, but not experience it every day. And I think it's important for you to, we talked about empathy yesterday, and I'm sure we'll talk about empathy and putting yourself in your fellow man's shoes more throughout this series and such. But, it's a matter of, taking a step back and identifying what people are talking about. I think it's also important to educate yourself, right? I mean, since people of color and Black people specifically were brought to the North American continent in 1619, we've always been told that our lives didn't matter, and those stories have transcended time. Those stories get passed down from mothers to fathers and to sons and daughters and grandparents and so on and so forth, because of some very specific occurrences and issues that have taken place over time. I mean, like I mentioned, first and foremost, we were brought here as slaves, you know what I mean? And then even the highest court in the land, Supreme Court, they passed the 3/5 compromise, and if you don't know about the 3/5 compromise, I encourage you to look that up, educate yourself on that. But basically the 3/5 compromise said that a Black person was 3/5 of a man, literally 3/5 of a man, again, talking about what we spoke about yesterday. I didn't learn that in school. I learned that from my parents, and then, also even when the colonies wanted to break away from Britain and write the Constitution, this is a conversation that my boy Steve and I had last night. That wasn't written for us. And honestly, it wasn't even written for some of the white people that existed in society at that time. You know what I mean? It was written for rich white men who owned property. It sure wasn't written for women. Few people probably even realize that Black men had the right to vote before women did. So the Constitution is another argument. It's another thing to talk about. I'm not sure. I don't think I'll cover that, but I'm just trying to speak to some of the historical context as it relates to this moment and as it relates to Black Lives Matter, right? And then of course you have segregation. Segregation was law of the land until it was found to be unconstitutional because of separate but equal got struck down. And again, segregation wasn't that long ago. My dad is 61 years old. He'll be 62 this year. My dad was born in a segregated South. So it's ironic, and I think it also shocks me and surprises me because some people who are not understanding of the Black experience in this country have also lived it, and it doesn't make any sense. So it begs the question, like, do you hold those ideals of segregation, of racism? And some of them absolutely do. There are people out there that are racist, but I think there are also those that just like the empathy and the understanding of how it impacts their fellow man and other people. And then, even today, like I was just, mind blown, right, of some of the occurrences that happened yesterday. You know what I'm saying? Like we had anti-lynching legislation die in the Senate yesterday. Why? Like, how are we in 2020 and we do not have anti-lynching legislation? Even in this moment that we are in right now with protests going on around this country, even with, some people, rioting and such. And, I don't condone violence because me personally, I just don't believe that two wrongs make a right. But on the same token, like, people are angry, people are scared, people are sad, people are fearful. And we have legislators, half the Senate was like, we're not going to pass this anti-lynching legislation, even though they know the history. They know the history of lynchings in this country. I mean, by and large, people of color were the ones that were the subjects of lynching, but white people got lynched too. I don't understand, that's telling us, what reason would you have to not try to pass legislation like that? Again, furthering the fact that, Black lives don't matter. And then even President Trump yesterday, and I'm not going to make any of these political. I mean, some of these conversations may touch on politics or whatever, but it's not about, making this political whatsoever. It's about the movement, right? So, but there are political and policy implications that's important for us to understand. So, even yesterday, President Trump, we had the jobs numbers report come out. 2.5 million jobs were created this week or something, or in this last month. A lot of that is a result of course, economies reopening, cities reopening, people going back to work, a lot of service industry individuals and so on and so forth. And I'm happy for those individuals. But for Donald Trump to say something along the lines of, I hope George Floyd is looking down, smiling on these, job report numbers, or he'd be proud of them, or whatever he said, that's messed up. That is wrong. That is patently, that's just wrong. Like, and again, that's, the leader of the free world, someone that literally, a little more than a week ago had his life just taken from him. And we've all seen that 8 minute and 46 seconds or whatever it was of his life where he was begging for it. And then, just expired from him, and then, our president is saying that, I hope he's looking down on us, smiling at these job report numbers. Donald Trump needs to keep George Floyd's name out of his mouth. But again, it's not political. That's just wrong. I don't care who would have said that. It's just inappropriate. You know what I mean? But again, that furthers the point of Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? Like growing up, you know what I mean? Like in my lifetime, there are historical moments, right? That I'm sure, people that are older than me or my age or around my age or whatever can say that they remember where they were when they happened. You know what I'm saying? One is, for instance, like the Berlin Wall coming down, right? We were living in Tacoma, Washington, shortly after my brother was born. Shout out to Brandon Johnson. I love you, bro. Like, I watched the Berlin Wall falling on TV. I remember my dad saying, that's, we're about to move there. We moved to Germany shortly after the Berlin Wall fell. And I remember where I was when that happened. I was too young to remember it, but I'm sure people around my age or a little bit older can remember where they were when the Challenger explosion happened. Certainly probably everyone that sees this probably remembers where they were when September 11th happened. And then on the heels of that, probably also remember where they were when they found out that Osama bin Laden got killed. Or even, say Michael Jackson, when Michael Jackson died. Remember, so you get what I'm saying. But on the same token, in the black community and people of color and others should as well, though, I remember where I was when I was watching the Rodney King beating for the first time. You know what I mean? Like, I remember where I was, in rest in peace, Rodney King. I remember where I was when the verdict was read for the first time. The first verdict happened for the Rodney King trial, and all those cops got off for free. I mean, all those cops were found, they were acquitted. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was a moment. That was a moment for Los Angeles. That was a moment for our country, but even more specifically, that was a moment for Los Angeles, because so many people were like, the Latinos, the Latinx, individuals in Los Angeles County, as well as the black, residents there, have been speaking about police brutality for years and years and years. And then finally, it's like, oh, we got it on tape. Oh, it's on tape this time. So there's no way, you can refute this. But what happened? Those guys got off. And what happened? There was the LA riots. The LA riots happened after that because people were angry. People were upset. People were, frustrated, and they were hurting, and they were, around the time of Rodney King, Latasha Harlins, that story. And honestly, the LA riots were not only about the Rodney King verdict, but it was also about the killing of Latasha Harlins. If you don't know about that, look it up. That's a little black girl. I think she was like 13, 14, 15 years old or something like that. And she was in a convenience store and was walking in, she was accused of stealing something from the store or whatever, and was walking away from the counter, and she got shot in the back of the head. She got shot and that's on tape. That's on tape. That was on tape. If you Google it, you can look it up. Latasha Harlins. And the woman who killed her was a Korean woman. And she got probation. So rest in peace, Latasha Harlins. I remember where I was when Trayvon Martin, the Trayvon Martin circumstance happened. Like, I was living in Gainesville. One of my best friends, Sarah Helms, shout out to Sarah. I remember us speaking about that every day around that time. You know what I'm saying? Talking about just the details of some of these cases is just off, it's just out of this world, Trayvon Martin, that circumstance happened, George Zimmerman called the police, and he was told by a 911 operator, I followed that case very closely. He was told by a 911 operator not to follow him, don't follow him, but he pursued him. He followed him, black man, had a hoodie, had an Arizona iced tea in his hand, you know what I'm saying? Looked suspicious to George Zimmerman, but for the fact that he was black, gets killed by this guy. I don't think for a moment, I don't doubt for a moment that George Zimmerman feared his life, but I think that Trayvon Martin feared his life. I do believe that Trayvon Martin was defending himself and hitting that guy, and the pictures showed it and everything. You know what I'm saying? But that happened because, in my opinion, he was defending himself, but regardless of getting into the details of the case, rest in peace, Trayvon Martin, I remember the details of that. And then, of course, what happened to George Zimmerman? George Zimmerman got off. I remember Eric Gardner. In New York, we watched that on video as well. You know what I'm saying? Had the life, choked out of him, telling officers he couldn't breathe. Charges weren't even brought against that officer. Charges weren't even brought against him. You know what I mean? Freddie Gray, in Baltimore, another person in the course of being apprehended or being arrested, I should say, something crazy. I think his spinal cord was severed or something like that. And some of those officers were black as well. I think they were all acquitted or something like that, right? So I remember where I was learning about Botham Jean, guy just sitting in his house, minding his business, and a police officer getting off work walks into his crib and shoots the man. She got 7 years. At least she went to jail, but she got 7 years, What's another one? Walter Scott, Walter Scott. If y'all know the Walter Scott case, that happened not too long ago, probably within the last, 3 or 4 years or whatever, 2 or 3 years maybe. And, that happened down the street from my aunt's house in Charleston, South Carolina. Shout out to my aunt Tootsie, and that was also caught on tape. You know what I mean? This man is running away from the cops because he had a warrant or something for something nonviolent or whatever, a police officer shoots him in the back running away. And then a cop goes and puts the gun next to his body to try to give the impression that, through the course of a struggle or whatever the case may be, that, he had to defend himself and shoot him or whatever. But little did he realize he was on video doing that stuff. And he actually got convicted and went to jail. So, those are the things, what I'm saying? Like, those things sit with people in the Black community and other people of color. You know what I mean? Like, again, that's why we're marching. That's why people are angry. That's why people are sad. That's why people are scared. And there's so many more. Rest in peace, Botham Jean. Walter Scott. Like, I'm sure there are many others that don't come to mind right now, but like that's part of it, right? That's part of why we're so. This movement is in existence. I mean, and again, the movement didn't just start from civil rights. It may have a different lens right now, but it's all about Black lives and people of color's lives, and be able to be empathetic and understanding of what they're going through and what their struggle and their existence is in this country. One thing that I showed to a couple of my friends the other day was the closing scene to A Time to Kill. So John Grisham is an author. He made some very, controversial comments recently that I didn't really agree with too much. But, nevertheless, like, John Grisham is an author. A lot of his books are based on legal, I think he's an attorney, are based on like legal occurrences or whatever. So you may have heard of like The Client or the Pelican Brief or Philadelphia, with, Denzel and Tom Hanks or whatever. But A Time to Kill, is a movie that you should probably see. And honestly, like, if you're a person that, doesn't get the Black Lives Matter movement or doesn't understand, or like my boy Steve and I were talking about last night, like, how do we speak to people who don't, who don't understand Black Lives Matter, or also, more so believe about the All Lives Matter movement or whatever, but don't stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Watch the closing scene to A Time to Kill. A Time to Kill has Morgan Freeman in it, Matthew McConaughey, another actor in it whose name I won't say because he's been in trouble with a bunch of stuff, but like that I don't support. But Google that, YouTube the closing scene to A Time to Kill. And I can almost stop this conversation right there. And it's with Matthew McConaughey. The closing scene, honestly, more specifically, Google, A Time to Kill, YouTube A Time to Kill, Matthew McConaughey's closing argument. That is why we're in this fight for Black Lives Matter. And that will give you that will give you something, from a media standpoint that you can share with your counterparts that may not understand that. But honestly, like, it goes beyond like being killed. You know what I mean? Like, there are other instances and occurrences that have happened recently relating to that have, significant implications on Black lives. Look at the Flint water crisis, right? Like, those local governments knew about how that water was tainted for a long time, right? And people, in the community, there are people of color. I'm not the voice. I'm not the Black voice. I'm not the people of color voice by any stretch. But a lot of conversations I've had with my counterparts in the community believe that would not be even, it'd be a non-starter if that was a white community or predominantly white community or a community, that there's a lot of intersectionality with that issue, right? It's racial, it's socioeconomic, but if that was, Miami Beach, that situation would have been addressed real quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that was Aspen, Colorado, if it was Malibu, California, you get what I'm saying? Like, so, that's another element to this Black Lives Matter situation and circumstance. And even look at the federal response to Hurricane Katrina. Like, it was a fail. It was less than adequate. It was unsatisfactory. And again, there are that's a socioeconomic issue. That's also a race issue as well. So, Black Lives Matter goes well beyond just, being, killed by police, or even being killed by, going on a jog, like Ahmaud Arbery. Shout out, rest in peace, Ahmaud Arbery, you know what I'm saying? And, shout out to his family that's doing a lot of stuff in Georgia right now to address that issue and to impact the the legislature up there, as well as the local government in that community where he lived. So, like, you know, this conversation is complex, and I think that, you know, our friends in the community that don't understand it, we need to empower them with knowledge and educate them. You know, we gotta make sure that they understand what we're talking about. You know, so just not even, you know, moving on from like even historical events, right? Let's talk about like the justice system. You know, I just talked to you about, you know, some of these crimes that happened and these murders that took place in which, you know, people weren't brought to justice for them. You know, cops not even having charges pressed against them. You know, being found acquitted, even though it's on tape. You know, when someone, you know, gets killed by a cop, you know, they go on a paid vacation. You know what I mean? Even if it's on tape. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand it, you know, and that's part of the reason why so many people are a part of this movement. And, you know, just the miscarriages of justice that have happened over time as it relates to people of color, like the way that the death penalty has been implemented against people of color, as opposed to in contrast to our white counterparts. That's why so many people of color are against the death penalty, because there's a disproportionate number of people of color who have been sentenced to the death penalty as opposed to our white counterparts. You know, there was a time, and you know, it still happens in some communities, but you know, up until even the 60s or 70s or even 80s, were all white juries. You know, when a judge gives you your verdict, it's always you've been judged by a community of your peers, or whatever the case may be, whatever that language or verbiage is. Well, there have been decades back, you know, from the beginning of the 20th century, in which black people and people of color were never judged by a jury of their peers. You know, they were all white juries. And sometimes, you know, those cases were weak. Those cases were patently just false. They were fabrications of the truth. And, you know, there were sometimes death sentences that were given to people in a matter of minutes. And then the converse, right? In the converse, like Emmett Till's killing, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, in the converse, you know, you have a white person who goes on trial for murdering a black person, whatever the case may be. And the same thing happens for them. Like, I think you can look this up. Jurors in the Emmett Till case were like, well, we wanted to give some more time just so we can make it seem as though, you know, we were really deliberating about it, or whatever the case may be. And, you know, I think it was some very small amount of time before they found that those guys to be innocent. And then years and years and years later, they admitted to killing Emmett Till. Like, those are stories that, I mean, my family talks about. My family, my immediate family, you know, loved ones are married into families, like, you know, and those are the stories that are passed down, you know, from generation to generation. And, you know, it's dangerous and it's scary. I mean, there are many people, I shouldn't say many, there are people who commit crimes that they've committed themselves, and then they will blame a black person for it that doesn't even exist, right? That's dangerous, right? Like, look up the Susan Smith case in South Carolina, a woman who drove a van to a lake with her 2 little babies inside, and they died, obviously. And she said she got carjacked by a black man, and that's what happened. She's in jail for life, but after all the details came out. But that's dangerous. You're gonna have the police going out there looking for a person of color, specifically a black person, who could be, you know, potentially, you know, killed in the act of apprehension, right? There was a woman in South Florida about a week or so ago. I can't remember her name, but she had a child with autism. God bless him. He passed away. Why? Because she pushed him into a lake. She pushed him into a lake. Or to a pond, and he drowned. He was nonverbal. He couldn't, you know, he needed her assistance, right? Obviously. And because of his circumstance that he was in. And she blamed that on a black person that didn't exist. But she was on tape. Pushing pushing that child into the water. You know what I mean? And it's dangerous being black. You know, that's ultimately what, you know, people are talking about right now. Legalize being black. You know, I think I tweeted that not too long ago, or I put it on Instagram or Facebook or something, and that's real. But then also, you know, let's talk about the people who are calling the police on like black people who are just, you know, conducting everyday activities, whether they're, you know, selling water on the street, or they're barbecuing in a park or whatever the case may be. That's dangerous too, and people are intentionally putting crimes on black people sometimes, when they've done it themselves. I spoke about circumstances in which that was found to be true. I'm not casting aspersions on everybody. People are calling the police on black people who are just living their everyday life, like the brother that was in Central Park and asked a woman to put her dog on a leash because he's a bird watcher and he knows how, he cares about the environment, how animals that are off their leash can tear up the grass or whatever the case may be, or the foliage or whatever. And that is dangerous also, because especially with all that we have seen in the manner in which that, black people have had, or people of color have had their lives taken by police in moments of traffic stops, selling cigarettes like Eric Garner was doing, being allegedly using a counterfeit bill like George Floyd was. I mean, those people could have their lives taken as well. So, it's really important for us to, educate, those who, believe in all lives matter, but don't stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. I also want to talk about a little bit like this narrative that's out there, right? That like, well, black people only care when a white person kills them. They don't care about, violence in the inner city, or they don't care about black people killing black people and so on and so forth. That's patently false. And, there are marches, community organizers, community activists have been, elevating the conversation and addressing the issues that we may have in our inner cities as it relates to black on black violence. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So, but at any rate, there have been marches, there's a lot of conversation and dialogue about that. There's engagements with local, governments as well as local law enforcement on addressing those issues as it relates to, some of our inner city crimes and such and so on and so forth. So, someone who says something like that as if like, you only care when, you're killed by a white person. That's not true. That's not true. There are activists and organizers all throughout this country working on violence that's in the inner city or in, lower socioeconomic communities. But we can talk about the black on black violence, right? Because I try to empower myself with knowledge and, I read a lot about things, right? And, a lot of what I've seen, a lot of what I've saw that I've come across, right, is the fact that black on black violence is a misnomer in many respects. Like the perpetrators and the victims of crime really it correlates to your surroundings, your environment where you live, which means that if you live amongst black people and someone's going to commit a crime, it's going to be against another black person. If you live in a white neighborhood or in a white community and you commit a crime, it's going to be probably against another white person. So, not to mention the fact that there are statistics out there that show that our white counterparts in lower socioeconomic communities actually have a higher violence and murder rate than some of our, people of color in similar and like situations. But, look that stuff up, empower yourself with knowledge. You know what I mean? Like go out there and look it up. I'm not sitting here saying that I know everything. I don't. But, that on its face is just a comment like that, the Black Lives Matter movement only cares when they're killed, when someone's killed by a white person. It's just not right. It's just not right. And then also, even more so, more importantly, the Black Lives Matter movement, as it relates to the issue of police brutality, as it relates to the issue of community members racially profiling people, like in the Ahmaud Arbery case, those are racially motivated crimes. So that context is critical. So even someone who's talking about, black on black violence or whatever the case may be, we're talking about racially motivated hate crimes for all intents and purposes, right? So, it's really important to make sure that, we are educating our friends or family members or whatever the case may be who are espousing some of those things about all lives matter or that, black people don't care when they're killing each other, or black people don't care when, or only care when a white person kills them. This just doesn't make any, that falls flat in my opinion. And even look at all these protests that are happening. I participated in a protest last Sunday Was a little frustrated I couldn't participate today. You know, the effects of Tropical Storm Crystal Ball are impacting us here in Tampa. So, you know, God bless everybody that's in the path of that tropical storm, hoping everyone is safe with that. But, you know, so some of our protests here got washed out today. But at any rate, I participated in a protest last Sunday, and people were getting shot in the back with rubber bullets. You know, I mean, there are videos all over the internet. There was a video of people peacefully protesting that got pepper sprayed just 2 blocks off my balcony. That was on Good Morning America on Friday. You know what I mean? Like it's not funny, but it's also it's almost comical, the fact that you have police officers who can't stop the police brutality at a police brutality protest. How crazy is that? You know what I mean? So like, just look at that behavior, and then, you know, try to tell me that the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't have any credence or any validity. That just doesn't make any sense. That falls flat on its face, right? So, you know, I think that I have an opportunity to, again, like I mentioned yesterday, you know, educate ourselves, educate our friends, educate our families, educate our coworkers, educate people in general, be a leader in that sense. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. We're not saying other people's lives don't matter. We're not saying that Black Lives Matter more. As we talked about today, you know, talking about some of the historical things I could remember, you know, from high levels of government to crimes that were perpetrated, and in times in which, you know, Black people were murdered in you know, the action of arrest or whatever the case may be. Like, there's a reason, you know, and people in the Black Lives Matter movement, whether they're Black or, you know, our brothers and sisters in the white community, Asian community, Hispanic community, whatever the case may be, we can't all be telling the same lie. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's, you know, and then I encourage you, you know, people that are trying to have those conversations with people who more so believe in the All Lives Matter movement or don't really understand or support the Black Lives Matter movement. Tell them to talk to a person of color. They can educate themselves, you know, they can go online and look at things, you know, but tell them to have a conversation with a person of color. To me, that's the most powerful thing they can do. You know what I mean? Like, you know, regardless of, you know, taking them down, you know, a trip down memory lane, like I kind of did with you all, or even, you know, bringing up historical occurrences, or even showing them the closing arguments to, you know, Time to Kill or whatever the case may be. Have them talk to a person of color, or several for that matter, because no one person is the voice of the, you know, Black community or the Hispanic community or the Asian community, but, you know, and encourage them to have a mind of their own. You know, encourage them to be objective in that, because there's a lot of hypocrisy that's occurring right now as it relates to this moment. So that's all I can think about at this time. Tomorrow, I already know I'm going to talk about. You know, I already said, you know, let me know if there's things that, you know, we should talk about, have conversations about. I've gotten ideas about bringing other people into these conversations as well, which I think can be very dynamic and very helpful and very enlightening to a lot of people. But tomorrow I'm going to talk about the movie Get Out. The movie Get Out is deep. It's deep. And I think that, and I really hope that, you know, people really saw beyond the entertainment value that existed in Get Out, the layers and, you know, peeling back the onion of how significant that movie was. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. So tomorrow, day 3 is going to be about the movie Get Out. And shout out to Jordan Peele. All right, y'all take care and be safe. Peace.